Right, and here we are. So the first time that you load up Blender, you'll be greeted with a splash screen. So Blender works in a number of different ways. You can use it for both 3D animation and 2D animation, as well as video editing. We've got a number of options here for creating new files. So for now, all you need to do is hit the general option, and that will leave you with a default scene. So the first thing we're going to do is take a little look around the interface so that you can get familiar with everything. The most obvious thing that you see right in the middle of the screen is what we call the 3D viewport. So this is where we will add our objects and interact with everything within the 3D scene. Blender is made up of a number of different panels. Obviously the 3D viewport. Down at the bottom here we have the timeline, which will be useful for animation. Over on the right we have what we call the outliner, and that's where we can see all of the different objects, cameras, lights, anything that we've added to our scene will be listed in here. Below that we have the property editor. So this is broken down into a number of different tabs. These different tabs allow you to look at properties of elements of your scene and anything related to the currently selected object within the scene. Up at the top we can see a number of different tabs, and these take us to a number of predefined layouts. Blender is quite configurable, so we can actually adjust the layout to suit our needs. We can split windows, we can add in new different property editors. So the way you would do that is you can actually drag the edges of windows around to adjust the size of anything you need. If you right click, you can add a split, so we can add a horizontal split here, and that will give us two viewports to work with. We can then, in the top left, we can change the editor type that we drop in here. So if we wanted to, we could add something like a graph editor, which is useful for animation. If you then want to split this further, again, we can right click on the border here, add in a vertical split, and we could have a second viewport. So we maybe jump into the camera view on one and we have our perspective view on the other. If you want to merge these, just right click and hit join areas. You'll get a big arrow appear and you can click over the panel that you want to get rid of. So we can merge that down, right click, join areas, and again do this, and we're back to our original default layout. So the first thing you're going to want to learn how to do within Blender is navigate within the 3D viewport. It's very simple to do. We use our middle mouse button, and if you hold it down, as you move the mouse around, you can see we are actually orbiting around a central point in our scene, currently where the cube is. Now if we hold down the shift key on our keyboard and the middle mouse button together, then we can do what is called panning the viewport, so moving it around relative to our view. Finally, to zoom in and out, we have two options here. We can either hold down the control key on our keyboard and the middle mouse button together, and that will allow us to zoom in and out of the center of our screen. Or if you have a scroll wheel on your mouse, you can use that scroll wheel equally to zoom in and out. It's up to you which you prefer. These three actions, orbiting around, panning the viewport, and zooming in and out, are things that you're going to be doing all the time while you're animating. So it's really worth spending a bit of time getting familiar with 3D space before continuing with the rest of the class. In addition to the shortcut keys for navigation, we have what's called a 3D gizmo up at the top here. It will allow us to jump into any of the orthographic views. So by that I mean if we click on here, you can see we're in the front view. If I click on the x-axis, that will take us to a side view, and the z-axis will take us to a top view. You can see which view we're in up in the top left here. So if we click and drag on this circle, it will allow us to orbit around our scene, just the same as if we were using the middle mouse button. In addition, we have these other icons down here. The magnifying glass, clicking and holding on that will allow us to zoom in and out, and the hand will allow us to pan around within our scene. There are two other buttons down here. The camera button allows us to jump into camera view, and just orbiting around will take us straight out of that again. And we'll look into the camera a little bit more in a later lesson. The other option that we've got here is this little grid icon, and that allows us to switch between perspective and orthographic view. It's not something we'll be using an awful lot. We'll tend to stick in perspective view for animation. If you want to jump to any of these different orthographic views, which can be useful from time to time, instead of using this gizmo up at the top here, we can use shortcut keys. If you have a number pad on your keyboard, hitting the number 1 will jump you to front view, hitting number 3 and you're going to side view, and number 7 will take you into top view. If I hit 9, it will actually take us to the opposite view, so it's taking us from top down to bottom. If I'm in the front view here, by hitting 1, hitting 9 will take us into back view, and the same for side view. Obviously right can be switched to left with the number 9 key on the numpad. Hitting 0 on the numpad will take us into the camera view. Almost everything in Blender can be achieved using menus and clicking on buttons on screen. But if you actually want to get efficient at using a piece of 3D software, you really need to start using keyboard shortcuts. Throughout the course, I'm going to be using keyboard shortcuts and I'll be highlighting the ones I'm using along the way. But if I ever miss anything, then if you have a look down in the bottom right of my screen, I have an option enabled which shows you exactly which mouse buttons I'm using, and it will also highlight any shortcut keys that I happen to be using as well.